There's a version of Walmart that lives in the American imagination, and it is a genuinely nice story. A man named Sam Walton, a folksy guy in a feed cap driving an old pickup truck he refused to trade in even after he was a billionaire, looks at rural America in the 1960s and sees people paying too much for the basics. So he builds a store, then another. He keeps his prices lower than everyone else's, not through some trick, but by being relentless, almost pathological, about cost, and he passes the savings straight to the customer. Everyday low prices. That is the whole pitch, and it fits on a bumper sticker. In this version, Walmart is the great equalizer. It is the reason a family in a small town can afford school clothes and a full cart of groceries on a single modest paycheck. It is the company that fought inflation and won over and over, decade after decade, while wages stalled and everything else got more expensive. There is the greeter at the door who knows your name. There is the rollback smiley face cartoonishly knocking prices down the aisle de bow. There is the comforting idea that scale, done honestly, is nothing more sinister than efficiency handed back to ordinary people. Economists even have a term that makes it sound noble: consumer surplus, the gap between what you would have paid and what you actually did. By that measure, Walmart might be one of the most successful institutions in the history of commerce. It stocks more than 140,000 different products in a single supercenter. It serves around 240 million customers every week across the world. It employs more people than any other private company on the planet, more than 2 million of them, a headcount larger than the standing armies of most nations. From the outside, it looks like the purest possible expression of a simple promise. Sell things cheap. Sell an unimaginable quantity of them. Let the math take care of itself. That is the romantic version, and it is a good one. It is painted on the walls of the stores. It is printed in the opening pages of the annual report. Sam Walton built a cathedral to the ordinary shopper, and the sermon has not changed in 60 years. There is only one problem with it. Almost none of it explains where the money actually comes from. Here is the number that quietly breaks the whole story. Walmart's net profit margin is about 2.5%, not 25%, not 12. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 3 cents of profit on every single dollar that crosses the register. For a company that pulls in more than $640 billion a year, that margin sounds less like a business and more like a rounding error that learned to walk. If you opened a lemonade stand and cleared 2.5%, your own accountant would gently ask you what had gone wrong. So sit inside the contradiction for a moment, because everything depends on it. Walmart sells more physical goods than any company in the history of the species, and it barely makes a profit doing it. The single most efficient retailer ever assembled, the one that spent 60 years perfecting the movement of a box from a factory to your hand, runs on a margin thinner than the tip you leave a waiter you did not like. And yet, Walmart is one of the most valuable companies on earth. Its stock trades near record highs. The family that founded it is not merely wealthy, but sits among the richest dynasties in human history, worth well over $300 billion between them. A fortune that grows while the margin stays flat as a table. Those two facts cannot coexist if you believe the bumper sticker. A razor-thin margin and a bottomless fortune do not belong in the same paragraph unless the fortune was never really coming from selling the groceries in the first place. And it wasn't. The retail floor, the part you can see, the part with the smiley face and the yellow rollback tags, is not actually the business. It is the front. It is, in the coldest possible accounting terms, the customer acquisition cost for a machine that sits behind it. Humming, invisible. And that machine does not sell laundry detergent at all. Once you understand what it does sell, the 2.5% stops looking like a weakness. It starts looking like the cheapest ticket ever printed to the most valuable show on earth. Hold that margin up against the companies Walmart is actually valued alongside, and the strangeness sharpens. A technology company keeps 20, 30, sometimes 40 cents on the dollar. A luxury brand keeps even more. Walmart keeps between 2 and 3. On the surface, it belongs in a completely different, humbler category of business, the low-margin grind of moving physical goods. And yet the market prices it like it belongs with the high-margin machines, because the people who move real money for a living have quietly figured out what the margin conceals. They are not paying for the grocery business. They know the grocery business barely breaks even by design. They are paying for the 240 million weekly relationships, the data exhaust, the float, and the advertising engine that all of it makes possible. The retail margin is not the return on the investment. It is the cost of maintaining the asset. And the asset is you. To understand why nobody has simply copied all of this, you have to look at the cost to enter. And the cost to enter is the entire point of the story. On paper, retail is the most competitive business in the world. Anyone can open a store. There is no government license that says you may not sell canned beans. So ask yourself why no new national big box competitor has emerged from nothing in something like 40 years. The last one that tried at scale mostly went bankrupt. The barrier is not legal, it is physical, and it is measured in the tens of billions of dollars. To compete with Walmart at the level where the economics actually start to work in your favor, you do not need a warehouse. You need a continental nervous system. More than 150 distribution centers, each one a building so large you could lose a commercial airliner inside it. Positioned with such deliberate geometry that no store in the country is more than a day's drive from its supply, you need one of the largest private trucking fleets in America, thousands of tractors and tens of thousands of trailers running 24 hours a day. Drivers who are among the highest paid in the industry precisely because the trucks can never stop. And then you need the part nobody can see, which is the software. You need a system that knows a specific store in a specific town in Ohio will sell a particular number of umbrellas the day before it rains there, and pre-positions them automatically without a human deciding anything. Walmart built the commercial internet before there was a commercial internet, pushing its suppliers onto shared data links in the 1980s so that a cash register beep in one town could reorder a pallet in another. Here's the trap folded inside the trap. None of that infrastructure pays for itself until you already have the volume, and you cannot possibly get the volume until you already have the infrastructure. It is a chicken and egg problem with a 10-figure price tag stapled to it. Walmart solved it the only way it can be solved. Over 60 years, one store at a time, reinvesting relentlessly, building the network quietly before anyone, including most of its competitors, understood what the network was truly for. A challenger today would have to spend that entire fortune at once, up front, with no customers yet, praying to reach a scale that Walmart already comfortably occupies. So the real cost of entry was never the money alone. It was time, and time is the one input no amount of capital can buy back. The moat is not filled with water. It is filled with decades. And there is a second moat behind the first one, made of pure buying power, and it compounds the problem for any challenger. Because Walmart buys more of almost everything than anyone else on Earth, it does not pay the same price you would pay or that its competitors would pay. When a supplier sells to Walmart, it is not negotiating. It is being told. Walmart can demand a lower unit cost, better payment terms, and often the right to dictate how the product is packaged and shipped. Because losing Walmart's shelf space is, for many manufacturers, an extinction-level event. A single supplier can do a third of its entire annual business through Walmart alone. That dependency flows one direction, and Walmart knows it. So a new competitor does not merely start smaller. It starts paying more for the identical box of cereal, which means it must either accept a worse margin than the company already running on almost none, or charge the customer more, which defeats the only reason the customer walked in. The scale does not just protect Walmart, it actively taxes everyone who tries to imitate it. And layered on top sits the real estate itself. Thousands of prime retail parcels bought decades ago before the sprawl arrived, land that has quietly appreciated into a portfolio worth a fortune on its own, entirely separate from whatever the stores sitting on top of it happened to sell that year. So, where does the money actually come from? Start with the piece almost nobody outside of finance ever thinks about because it is genuinely beautiful in its simplicity. It is called negative working capital, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Here is how it works. When Walmart orders a truckload of goods from a supplier, it does not pay for them right away. It negotiates payment terms. 30 days, 60 days. Sometimes considerably longer because when you are the largest buyer on Earth, you dictate the terms rather than accept them. But Walmart is so fast and its shelves turn over so violently that it has already sold most of those goods to you for cash, long before that supplier's invoice comes due. Think carefully about what that actually means. You hand Walmart real money today for a bottle of shampoo. Walmart does not pay the company that manufactured that shampoo until next month. For those weeks in the middle, Walmart is holding your cash, and it is holding the supplier's product, and it owes nothing to anybody for the privilege. Now, multiply that single bottle by billions of transactions a year across every category and every store permanently, and you get something extraordinary. A permanent, rolling, interest-free loan the size of a national economy floating through the company at every moment of every day. That float can be invested. It can fund the next round of expansion. It can sit in short-term instruments quietly earning yield. And it costs Walmart essentially nothing because it is the suppliers, tens of thousands of them, who are collectively financing it without ever quite framing it that way. The store is, in the most literal financial sense, a bank that happens to hand you a receipt for detergent. But the float is only the old engine, the one that has been running since Sam Walton's day. The new engine is even more lucrative, and it is the specific reason Wall Street analysts stopped valuing Walmart like a grocer and started valuing it like a technology company. That engine is advertising. Walmart now operates one of the fastest growing advertising businesses in the entire United States, a division called Walmart Connect, and it is already generating billions of dollars a year with a line going almost straight up. Think about why. Those 240 million weekly shoppers are, collectively, the single most valuable audience on the planet. Because Walmart does not have to guess what they want. It knows. It knows exactly what you buy, how often, at what price, in what combination, in what season. And brands will pay staggering sums to appear at the top of a search for paper towels or to occupy the right digital shelf at the right moment, in front of a customer the algorithm knows is ready to spend. Advertising does not carry a 2.5% margin. It carries a margin of 70, 80, sometimes 90%, because once the audience exists, the cost of showing them one more ad is almost zero. Every dollar of advertising revenue is worth many dollars of grocery sales in pure profit terms. Now, stack the rest on top because the advertising engine is only the loudest of several quiet ones. There is Sam's Club, the members-only warehouse arm, which runs on a subtly different and even more elegant model, where a large share of the profit does not come from selling anything at all. It comes from the membership fee itself, collected up front before you have bought a single thing. Money that is close to pure margin because the cost of letting you through the door was already paid. There is private label, the store brands, where Walmart is both the retailer and effectively the manufacturer's boss, capturing a fatter slice on every unit because it cut the national brand out of the middle. There are the slotting fees. The money suppliers pay simply for the privilege of good shelf position, revenue that has nothing to do with anyone buying the product. And then there are the fees from third-party sellers on the online marketplace, the membership income from Walmart Plus, the financial services, the money transfers, the check cashing, the credit offered to customers many banks would not touch. The data itself, which is arguably the single most valuable asset the company owns, never appears cleanly on any line of the balance sheet. A picture snaps into focus. The retail floor exists to assemble the audience. The audience is the product being sold, and the customer, walking out to the parking lot with a cart of cheap goods, feeling like the clear winner of the transaction, is simultaneously the merchandise. But do not mistake any of this for a comfortable, sleepy business, because the very same thin margin that hides the real engine is also a permanent loaded weapon pointed directly at the company's own head. When you operate on 2.5%, you have almost no room for error, and so nearly everything becomes a structural trap waiting to spring. Consider theft, which the industry politely calls shrink. A retailer with fat margins can shrug off a little loss as a cost of doing business. Walmart cannot. A shift of even a single percentage point in shrink across a company of this size erases billions of dollars in profit outright, which is precisely why it invests so heavily in cameras, in AI-driven surveillance at the exits, and in self-checkout systems that, if you look closely, quietly transferred the entire labor of scanning your own groceries onto you for free, while framing it as convenience. Consider wages. Walmart employs more than 2 million human beings, and every single dollar per hour it raises pay across that ocean of workers costs it billions annually. So the company lives permanently trapped between a labor market that keeps demanding more and a business model that mathematically cannot afford to give very much. A tension that never resolves and never disappears, only flares and subsides. Consider the capital treadmill, which may be the cruelest trap of all. Because the moat is built out of physical infrastructure, that infrastructure has to be endlessly maintained, upgraded, automated, and expanded. Walmart can never stop spending, not for a single year, because the exact moment it stops building, a faster and hungrier competitor starts closing the gap. And then there is the largest structural threat of all, the one with a name, and the name is Amazon. Walmart spent decades building the most efficient system in the world for moving goods from a factory to a store shelf. Amazon looked at that and built a different system entirely, one for moving goods directly to a doorstep. And crucially, it did not carry the immense dead weight of thousands of physical buildings and the people inside them. For years, that was Walmart's single greatest vulnerability, an existential one, and it has since spent tens of billions of dollars frantically retrofitting its own stores into shipping hubs, turning the very buildings that were a liability into forward warehouses that sit within 10 miles of most of the American population. The genius of the model and the fragility of the model turn out to be the exact same fact, stated two ways. Scale is the only real defense, which means scale must always increase, which means a company built on this logic can never, ever rest. It is a shark. The moment it stops swimming, it drowns. There is one more trap, subtler than the others, and it is the trap of the promise itself. Walmart's entire identity is built on being the cheapest, and a promise like that is a cage as much as a crown. It can never meaningfully raise prices to relieve the margin pressure because the low price is not a feature of the business. It is the business, the single thing holding the whole audience together. The moment Walmart stops being the cheapest, the reason to walk through the door evaporates, and the advertising machine loses the very crowd that gives it value. So the company is locked into a race it started and can never leave, forever driving its own prices down, forever squeezing itself because the alternative is to stop being Walmart. And the model does not even travel well. This same machine, so unstoppable at home, was beaten and driven out of Germany, out of South Korea, humbled in country after country where it could not achieve the scale that makes the whole thing work, where local rivals already owned the ground and the supply chains and the habits. The lesson buried in those retreats is unsettling. The model is not magic. It is a machine tuned to one specific set of conditions, and it only prints money where it is already the biggest thing in the room. Take away the scale and the emperor is revealed to be running on 2.5% like anyone else. So picture the two futures because they are both genuinely live possibilities, and the company lives every single day in the tension between them. In the version that works, the flywheel keeps spinning and it accelerates. The stores pull in the enormous audience. The audience feeds the advertising machine, which throws off high-margin cash by the billion. The cash funds automation and robotics that squeeze the last remaining inefficiencies out of the supply chain, which allows prices to fall again, which pulls in an even larger audience, which feeds the advertising machine yet more. The float grows alongside the revenue. The ad business quietly becomes the true profit center it is already on its way to being. And one clear morning, the market fully re-rates the company, understanding it at last, not as a retailer at all, but as a media, data, and logistics empire that uses suspiciously cheap groceries as the bait in an enormous patient trap. In that world, the 2.5% margin was never the story anyone should have been telling. It was simply the toll, and the toll was astonishingly cheap, paid gladly to keep 240 million people walking through a data collection apparatus every week of their lives. But there is the other version, and it is not remotely far-fetched. In that future, the margin that always sat one bad quarter away from zero finally, quietly, slips beneath it. Wage pressure and a permanently tight labor market push costs up faster than automation can push them down. A rival, or a coalition of them, finally cracks the last-mile delivery problem more cheaply than Walmart can, and peels away exactly the most profitable, highest-spending customers, the very ones who were unknowingly subsidizing everyone else. The capital treadmill starts demanding more cash than even the float can supply. And the thin margin, the one that looked like iron discipline for 60 proud years, reveals itself at last as what it always was in pure mathematics. A business with no cushion whatsoever, running a marathon with no finish line, permanently one stumble away from a loss it cannot absorb. Both of these Walmarts are real. Both of them are contained inside that same absurd little number, 2.5%, the number that appears to mean almost nothing and in fact explains almost everything. The store was never the business,